I want to thank everyone for coming in. We thank our sponsors, which is Profoto Daily, Photo Shelter, Epson, and American Photography. We do ask everyone, if you haven't, to please subscribe to our YouTube channel, which is Projections NYC. Another bit of business. July 9th, we're going to be in New York City live again at the Photo Shelter headquarters in New York, and you'll get information about that in the upcoming email blast. And tonight we have two terrific presenters, Mark Edward Harris, and we start with Kyle Liu, who's
Louis.
out of sorry, who's out of Brooklyn, my hometown. So Kyle, you share the screen, and it's all yours.
Thank you, Frank. So hi everyone, my name is Kyle Louis. I am a photographer, born and raised in New York City. Still here, haven't been priced out yet. And I'll be showing some of my work for my project, Sowing Rice with Salt. Technical difficulty. Okay.
Are you sharing your screen?
No, but it
Oh, there you
should.
go.
Yeah.
Okay.
Can you guys see it?
Yes. Yep.
Okay. Um, it's not letting me scroll though. Oh. All right, there we go. Okay, so this is my project, Sowing Rice with Salt. So what I've done with this project is I've taken archival photos from family albums and then done recreations of them with their children. So the archival photo is of an immigrant parent, and then the recreation is of the second generation child. And I'll show some of the writing at the end. It's a little hard to all see in one screen, but I also collected writing from the child about how immigration has impacted their relationship and how um, culture and immigration have all affected their intergenerational relationship and their family dynamics. So I'll scroll through some of the images. And
And kind
so
of these locations, I mean, certainly Statue of Liberty, but those other locations are the same locations of the original photograph?
no, no.
No. Okay.
Like I can share as I go actually if that's of interest, but like a lot of this project was just being creative with location scouting and trying to be creative with how to create a set within the spaces that I had. So that like this one is in an apartment I used to live in Williamsburg. This is my current apartment, and I even bought the posters. And for this one, I wanted to be a sort of a conversation of, reflecting Akil, who's the my friend on the left, his sort of newer musical taste, while his dad is Caribbean, I think from Jamaica. And his, as you can see from all the posters, it's his love for Bob Marley, but just reflecting the differences between taste and generation and how he's more of a hip hop fan. Um, Obviously the Statue of Liberty, taken on site, no AI.
Good.
This was in a restaurant um, in Crown Heights, also in my
Yeah.
apartment.
Yeah. And tell us who the people are.
Yeah, so most of them are my friends from college. Some people I reach out to on Instagram because I find that during Father's and Mother's Day, people will like to post old photos of their parents and then make some heartfelt writing. And then for some people, I've just reached out to them, like Alan Chin, who was a presenter through the
Yes.
projections. He's in my project,
Great.
and he if you follow him on Instagram, he's a very good writer too. And so when he posted about his father, I was like, you've already done all the work here. You don't even need to do the writing. Just stand with me on Eldridge Street in the Lower East Side and we can retake this photo.
Wow.
Um,
Great.
and so, yeah, I am also the child of immigrants. My dad immigrated from Hong Kong when he was around 10 years old, grew up in Brooklyn. But I think this project for me was one like about immigration, but also how do we bridge all of the differences. Um, within these relationships and all the different cultural backgrounds that we're coming from. Um, and so I realized this. I was in Photoville last year, but I had started this project in 2021. But when I was in Photoville, I was like, huh, somebody asked me, why did you start this project? And I realized at that time I was at the time that I started the project, I just finished going through some therapy, and much of the therapy was touching on like sort of healing and reconciling that relationships. And so I think subconsciously when I started this project, it was a way for me to connect with other people, with friends about some of the same like struggles we face in those relationships and how we still manage to uh maintain love and resilience in despite all the tensions and misunderstandings.
And Kyle, so when you're explaining this idea to the potential subjects, do they get it right away? What was that process for you?
Um, I think that they definitely get it, but I think that one thing I've struggled with because I'm the one who's facilitating the writing. I'm sitting down with them. I'm having sort of like a casual interview conversation where I we just go on a sort of conversation about the relationship with their parent. And I take notes while I'm having the conversation, and I try to figure out like what's the thread, what's the sort of theme, right? Like is it guilt, is it shame, is it like a sort of tenderness and warmth, right? Like whatever it is, whatever has the most like intimacy and emotionality to it, I want them to focus that in their writing. I think the thing that I struggle with is, there's writing that I'll read it at the end of the presentation, but there's writing that really touches on the nose of the theme. It's very on the nose about immigration and culture. Then there's other ones that don't really talk about like, oh, my parent is an immigrant, but it's more subtle. And so that's something I've struggled with in terms of like how on the nose do I need people to be for example, one of my friends wrote about um how she wanted to be different from her mother but ended up being very similar. Now that in a way I feel like speaks to family, speaks to like the way we, our parents sort of imprint on us, but it's also speaks to culture and speaks to like the way we reconnect with our loved ones.
Hmm, okay. And most people were eager to do it once you explained what you were doing
Um,
when you made your initial
I
contact.
think the photo is the easy part, the writing's the hard part. And so
Hmm.
some people take like a year to finish the writing or 6 months because it's so difficult to capture a relationship and be able to summarize such an important relationship on one page of writing. Because I try to limit it to a single handwritten page. This is in Central Park. This is Carla. She grew up in Queens. This one was crazy because right before she went into these bushes barefoot. This is in Central Park, like right across the street from the Museum of City of New York. Right before she stepped in those bushes barefoot, we could hear rustling of rats in there, and she's like, "It's okay, I'll step in there." And I was like, "All right, you're even braver than I am." So props to
That's
her.
great.
So that's eagerness. You asked me how eager people are for this project. That was eager. She was willing to do whatever it took.
That's a New York City moment right there. That's great.
It's my
That
friend
should be in your
Kingsley.
forward. That should be in the forward of the book.
This is my friend Kingsley. This is in my parents' lobby, in their apartment building in East Midtown. Photographed at midnight so that none of the residents would call the cops on me. It's my friend Mai, shot in Chinatown, where the lamps are.
And for a lot of these people, was it therapeutic on any level?
Yeah, I think there's a range to it, but like some people, the deepest like processes for them was this project prompted having conversations with their parent that allowed them to sort of talk about things that they hadn't talked about before. So, for example, here, this woman here on the left, her name's Shanita. She's Filipino Chinese, but her family is like a military family, and so they grew up very strict, um, very like regimented, and so it was interesting because, she's an adult now, but every child is still a child to their parent. But they had a conversation about the ways that like there was a lot of emotional suppression in the household. Um, and she told me that her mother was receptive. I don't know if people are as willing to change, but she said she heard her, she listened. Um, and then there's just the bonding activity of like looking through old family photos with your family members that can bring back such fond memories, and you get to open up and hear stories that you'd never heard before.
So is part of the process, they select the photograph and then you collaboratively figure out where you're going to do the next version?
I tell them to like to gather the best and most visually striking portraits of their parent from their album and then send them to me, and then we can choose them together because I have to think about, okay, this setting is too unrealistic, or if we do it, we're gonna have to pay a lot of money to rent out some hotel. And some people are okay with that. Like I have a somebody who just had a child, and I had it a little bit different from the regular portraits I had. It was him and his father, and he was sitting in his father's lap as a baby on a carousel. And then I had the recreation of him with his newly born child sitting in his lap. And we did that at the Jane's Carousel in Brooklyn Bridge Park, and they rented out the carousel for a little bit.
Wow.
But I wanted that. I really liked that idea, and we were willing to go to such leaps and bounds for that one because it talked about, in his writing, he talks about what fatherhood means to him, not so much about what his relationship was like with his dad, but how he wants to raise his own son in the world.
Wow. And how is this project sort of therapeutic for you personally?
I think it's similar to any sort of like therapy, right? When we're struggling, when we're hitting rock bottom, our our reflex is to just isolate, I think, a lot of the time. And the strongest thing you can do is actually reach out and have someone listen to what your story or what you're struggling with. But I think it's also healing to hear other people's stories that are similar to your own, and so to know that you're not alone.
Mm.
That's I think that's where empathy comes from. It's like it's connecting and trying to understand another person's experience. And I guess that's how people differentiate, right? Sympathy and empathy. Empathy is like real, true understanding when you've gone through the same experience. And I think that that was the therapy for me, being able to know that these unspoken stories that we talk about are actually more common and more connected than we realize.
Beautiful.
This I like this one because my friend Tinhua, he's Taiwanese, but he grew up in Detroit, and so his mother worked in an auto factory there, before like the auto industry shut down. So I really like this photo because I thought he didn't mention it in his writing, but it just kind of subtly spoke to where he comes from, um, the auto town. Um, yeah, and so just to give a little bit more context, I started this project when I was in college, when I was taking classes at the SMFA, and I took a class as a senior when it was all freshmen at the School of Museum of Fine Arts with the professor named Bonnie Donahue. And all the freshmen, when I showed them this project, I just started shooting it on digital, and all the freshmen were like, "What are you doing here?" They basically were like, all critique, no affirmation. And after the class, Bonnie was like, "Oh, don't listen to them. Like, there's something here. You should keep on working on it." And so I don't know if it was delusion or narcissism or whatever it was. I just continued working on it because it felt emotionally meaningful to me. Um, but it's kind of it feels a little surreal to have it have grown so much. It was in Photoville and featured on CNN last year. But to think
Wow.
about the amount of self-doubt that I had, and even in January of 2023, I had all this work and I was talking to my mentor, Salvador Espinosa, in who's a teacher at Bronx Documentary Center. He was like, "What are you doing just sitting on this work? Like you gotta show it to the world." And I was like, I don't know how to do that. Like this is my first body of work I've ever created. And he's like, I'll help you. So this project has really been like how do you say when people say it takes a village to bring about the success. And even the year before that, one of my mentors, Abigail Montes, who is a educator at ICP in the South Bronx, um, I was telling her like, oh, I'm gonna stop working on this project. It's too much work. There's too much logistics involved because I also collect people's prints so that I can scan it so that it's good enough quality. If I didn't scan them, then they probably wouldn't have been good enough quality for Photoville. And she's a very tough love type of woman. So she was like, I'm not gonna let you stop working on this. Like you have to, or else like I'm gonna kick you in the butt. So
You know,
I'm
that's
grateful.
one thing you'll learn when you speak to people who are more or longer in the business. It's about conviction.
Yeah,
All of it is about conviction. And if someone can talk you out of it, you know, that's not good. But with all this, down, and then you persevere, you end up with a terrific project.
thank
Good
you.
for you.
I
And,
can.
and I have to say that's a lesson that all of us keep on learning all the time, even seasoned, veterans who are listening today. I'm sure everyone has a story there that, it was too hard, it was this, it was that, and they pushed through. So great.
Would it be of interest for me to read one of the writings?
Yeah, read one of them
Okay. Um, so,
or an edited version of one of them.
yeah, it's just hard for me to see the top of this right now because of the. Oh, there we go. All right. Um, Before my name was my name, it was my mother's. It was also the name she gave to all her stillborn and miscarried children. We are all precious stones, my green jade and her blue jewel. She named me after herself, as an extension of herself in our new life in a new country. In Chinese, there's a saying which means literally, green is born of blue but surpasses blue. Metaphorically, it means that the student surpasses the master. I'm supposed to be better than her, but I often wonder about this word better. I can maybe understand what she envisioned. All those countless violin lessons, the SAT prep, the elite high schools and later elite universities, the tutorials on how to find a good husband, the scale in our bathroom, the counter full of skincare products, the way she would look at me when she would say, I am so lucky that you are beautiful. My mother often says she never wished for a beautiful child, only one that was alive. Perhaps this is also what she means by better, though it would also mean she died a small death somewhere between countries. She left her degrees, friends, and family in China. She arrived in Chicago in 1991 with nothing but a bag of books and $80. She thought she would continue her education in the States and instead found herself working three jobs because my father's student salary barely covered his meals, let alone hers. She worked in grocery stores, delivered newspapers, waitressed at Chinese restaurants. America was where she learned how to cook Chinese food, watching the chefs during her 10-minute lunch breaks in between her 14-hour shifts. America is where she discovered what meant to be without healthcare, to pull out her own ingrown toenails, to have her feet swell 2 sizes from standing all day, to buy everything secondhand at yard sales, to salvage, to scrounge, to keep food in the refrigerator long past its expiration date. We've given you a life where you don't have to suffer, my mother tells me. Everything we did for you, so you can be better. I think about the weight of my own gratitude. I think about the weight of my parents' sacrifices, the weight of redeeming them. And I think of jade, how it's made in the pressurized, dark tectonic plates collapsing into a single shard of green.
Wow. So now, which person in the photographs wrote that?
The first one I'll show you. And that's why I love this. I think she's an incredible writer. She actually went to like one of those art high schools where she focused on writing. But so I love her writing, but I also love the diptych because sorry, she's wearing the exact same dress
Yeah.
of her mother. And so like that, I think I love my favorites are the ones that are in conversation. The diptychs are in conversation with the writing, right? So she talks about being similar to her mother, but surpassing her mother. Um, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's to your credit that you got these people to sit and write and share, their emotions in a letter like that. That is that's so profound. I mean, for people to do that these days, to sit and write, to think, because I mean, that's of course a very thoughtful note for someone to put down. So that's really to your credit to have engaged deep enough into them that they would do that for you and for
Mhm.
themselves.
Mhm. Mhm.
You can easily see this how this becomes a book, right? I mean,
Yeah,
you can.
That's actually that's why Ted and Nune are here and helping me because I've been trying to figure out how to publish a book of this project. Um, so
And how many different how many images do you have so
I
far?
have about 40 stories. By the end
Oh,
of this year, probably 45. But I kind of want to just like, what's the way to put it? Like close the door, lock it, and swallow the key. And I feel like publishing the book is sort of that way because I love this project, but I kind of just want to like finish it up. And I find it a little bit creatively limiting after a while because since it's recreations and not
okay. No,
there, it's limiting. It's limiting. Yeah.
well, there's GoFundMe. There's a lot of different ways, and I know Ted and Noon really like to donate to young people's projects in a very, very big, big way. So I'm sure they're going to be your lead supporters in this project.
Don't offer their money like that.
You know,
Uh,
have you ever thought of sponsorship, like a lead
yeah,
sponsor, like an Olympic
somebody's
athlete?
got a lot of background noise there.
I'm sorry, sorry. There's a lot of noise here on the Starbucks.
Yeah,
No, Kyle. Seriously, immigrant voices are needed now more than ever, especially with Adams. Come to
Yeah,
New York. I
so
mean, you are in New
yeah,
York, but you know
I
what
would
I
love.
mean. Be controversial.
Sorry, what did you say? Have a lead sponsor, like an Olympic athlete?
Like have like what Frank was saying. I'm sorry, I'm unmuted and it's
yeah,
loud. I'm
yeah,
sorry,
yeah,
but
yeah,
I mean, I'll put it in the chat. But like, have
yeah, sure.
someone back you,
Like a
and
fiscal
then
sponsor?
Yeah,
yeah, and then when I meant, and this is the last thing, being controversial is not bad. Immigrant stories are needed, Kyle. We have
I
to
don't see.
change
Yeah,
the narrative.
I don't think of this project as controversial at all.
yeah, no, not at all.
I've been delighted to see how many people relate to it who are not even of immigrant families. Like I think there's something relatable to it even outside of immigrant families, which I really appreciate. Like I've had gay men come up to like white gay men come up to me and be like, "Oh, I really relate to this because it was so difficult, like coming out to my father." Um, yeah, I think it's speaking to the empathy part. Like you don't have to be an immigrant family to relate to these stories.
Yeah, not at all. It really is a great story, and you have to continue. So, what makes you think, Kyle, I have to close the door? Do you feel that you're finished? Do you feel you're done?
No, it's more like I would just have other projects that I want to work on, and
Okay.
I find that it's like limiting my ability to work on these new projects because of the logistical like work that it takes because not it's the photo, it's the recreation of the photo, it's the location scouting, it's the writing, it's collecting the writing, collecting the archival photo. It's just like a, a lot more admin than a regular like documentary project. Yeah.
That's true, but I will tell you, you will get no sympathy from this audience. All these folks work on long projects, traveling around the world, finding ways to get into sporting arenas, finding ways to meet people. It's,
Yeah.
that's half the job. But I have to say, when you present a body of work like this, it shows to an editor that you know how to talk on your feet. You know how to make things happen. And that's really a gift. That isn't something that comes easily. That you've talked your way into these people's world, and that is really a great, great qualification to be assigned a project. Oh, Kyle's the guy that can do this. Just something to think about. So thank you very much, Kyle.
Thank you, Frank.
All right. So, and stick around. I'm sure we'll have questions afterwards. So stop sharing and let's let our
Yeah.
friend Mark Edward Harris take over and show us his work as we get ready for the Olympics.
Great. Thank you, Frank. I appreciate being here. So first I got to share the screen, which I will do, and then I need to open my presentation. Whoops, I don't anybody don't look. There we go. Okay. Good. Can everybody see that?
Yes.
Good. Okay, so I called it the Miracle Games because the focus is on the first two Olympics that I covered, which are the games in Tokyo and Beijing, and both of them took place during the pandemic. And obviously, it was a crazy time. The games in Tokyo were delayed a year, and there were a lot of people there that didn't want it to happen. Only by the time the game started, there were about 23% of the people that were inoculated there, not because they didn't want to get inoculated, but because the Japanese government was very slow in rolling it out. And so, we really didn't know where it was going to go, but somehow they pulled it off. And so now, as we're exactly a month away from the beginning of the games in Paris, and it's going to be very different because now there's going to be crowds, and we're back to normal, though who knows what's going to go on there, but at least in terms of having a crowd, it's going to be there. And so I want to show you more of a photo essay. It's not that there's individual great shots. I mean, hopefully there are some good winners in here. But I want to sort of take you on a journey on what it was like to cover the Olympics. And so you get off the plane and you're greeted in Narita with somebody, showing you where to go and how to go through the process of getting screened, because every step in the way we were having COVID tests and we were locked down for a couple of days and then continued on. And as I said, not everybody was pro Olympics at all, and were actually protesters out there. And some, I think with pretty extreme views, like this person, where no Olympics anywhere, abolish the Olympics. I mean, I really believe that the Olympics, there's always issues. Some people say about economics and all this sort of stuff, but by and large, it's bringing the world together for a very positive thing.
Mark, just let me interrupt you.
Sure.
Going to the Olympics, were you going to shoot? Were you going to document? Like, what was your, impetus for going and, immediately, covering this type of work?
Right. Well, I have a love affair with Japan. For anybody who knows my work, my book, The Way of the Japanese Bath, about Japanese hot springs, is done well because I really do love the hot spring culture there. But I've also done a book on covering the tsunami, so I cover the good and bad, whatever happens. I'll get on a plane and go there. I speak Japanese fairly well. Been there something like 40 times. My ex-wife and still best friend is Japanese, and she's there. So whenever I teach a workshop, she does a tea ceremony for us. But and so a lot of it was really because it was in Japan, and just to add on to my Japan stories. But I also pitched around, and in a sense, because of the pandemic, it gave me an entrance in, because a lot of publications weren't sending the usual people, and so I pitched some stories to Newsweek and got in through Newsweek. It's very hard to get credentials in to shoot. And you just couldn't go there, couldn't get on a plane and just go to Japan. It was completely blocked off. You had to have a special permission to get in, and then to get into the games, there were no audiences other than a few people working it and some of the teams, but they decided it was too dangerous to have audiences there. But you can see here another image about, as we were getting ready for the games, there were people out there protesting, but the games did happen. And the amazing thing here, it looks like a fairly crowded audience, but it's just they painted seats in different colors. And so when you watch it on TV, it just didn't look like they were doing things for an empty for empty stands. And this shot, everybody was shooting on the left side because that's where everybody was performing to. But I decided, since people were getting that shot, to go on the other side and shoot, because I liked the opening of the Tokyo Stadium. And I had a little tripod. You're not supposed to shoot with tripods during the games. It was a little different for opening and closing ceremonies, but it was a 2-second exposure because I knew the fireworks, we're giving out the schedule, so we know when things are going to happen. But I wanted to do a long enough exposure so I could get the trail of the fireworks, and so that's how I did this shot. And people can feel free, and then Frankie, if you see it, if people have any questions at all, I'm more than happy to answer along the way. I purposely shot a lot of signage along the way, knowing that the games were historic because of the pandemic. And also on occasion, you'll see, indications that something's unusual because all the judges have masks. And so this shows a different element. And so often I do compose and wait for action to move through the frame rather than following the action. And so here's another example of that approach. This is an Australian skateboarder who actually won the gold. Unfortunately, another, I believe it was Australian skater, hit a cameraman by mistake, almost knocked him into the pool, but the guy went down, broke his elbow, and continued to shoot the video for the rest of the thing. So it's pretty impressive. Naomi Osaka playing for Japan, and she was a favored person, and so most of the photographers, because it's really difficult covering, because you can obviously only be at one place at one time. You try to cover 2 or 3 events a day, but a lot of people thought, okay, she's going to make it to the final, so why go on to any of the earlier matches? But she was knocked out in not this particular match, but the match after that. And so I'm fortunate to have gotten something with her at all.
And
This is
Mark, do you get a list of events that your whoever is sending you there, make sure you cover this?
No, for this particular one. Now I'm working with Zuma Press for Beijing and for Paris. Since I was doing it for Newsweek, I was allowed to go pitch stories, and they said, follow what you want to follow, and I'll end up showing you guys the one that was the biggest coverage. And then I also put the stuff in the stock as well. So in those days, I was either shooting with a Z6 with a 500 5.6, which is a slow lens, but and then I would borrow a lens from NPS, Nikon Professional Services. But as soon as for Beijing, I was able to get the 400 2.8 and the Z series, a Z 400 2.8 and the Z9, and went completely mirrorless at that time. But the key for me is I love the concept of what the camera can do that the eyes can't. We cannot see this. I mean, this is a fraction of a second. Probably I was shooting around 2500th of a second, and I ended up now with the Z9. I'm shooting even faster. But this happened so fast off the 10-meter board, which I love. I just love seeing things you can't see. I don't know how she kept this sort of very relaxed looking pose heading, downward after jumping off the 10-meter board. I'd be screaming and yelling, but that's why I'm not in the Olympics, or probably that's one of a number of reasons. But I mean, look how close she comes to it's not even a board. It's a solid piece of concrete. I mean, it's incredible to think of jumping off and coming this close to that.
And Mark, when do you realize you've got some great stuff? Are you looking at it like right after you take it, in the back of the camera, or are you doing it at night? I mean, how does that work for you?
That's a great question. I don't want to miss something, by looking down and reviewing photos. And so I try to really be there in the present. I will quickly check things to see if my exposure is good, if the focus is on. But it's really not till the end of the day that I really get to look and see things. Some people like, with Getty Images, they're tethered in and it's going back to an editor that's putting stuff out right away. With Zuma, we shoot and then we add captions and then get the stuff in. And so it's sort of like my friend David Burnett, who I know said we can sleep in September. And that's really the truth. You really don't sleep during the Olympics, but we don't go there to sleep. And you can see, but I also would look for angles. I didn't have the pressure with the sort of stories I was coming up to sort of shoot maybe the classical image. And so I would look for alternative angles and things. And I really did find it interesting to see how other people were covering the Olympics. And I was aware that when this guy dismounted, or when when the men on the rings were dismounting, that they would be framed by the white wall behind them. And so there were times that I could get an angle and think in advance about how something might look. And then, you sorry, go
yeah,
ahead.
and Mark, can you speak to the camaraderie, with the other photographers while because I'm assuming there's other photographers right on your left and your right, and they recognize the white background. What is the week or the 2 weeks of the experience of being with other great sports photographers?
It's 100% camaraderie. Everybody there that's been accredited, and it really is tough to get accreditation, but everybody there knows how to do the dance. And as you know, with professional photographers, there's a way to create win-win situations in very dynamic, fast-moving things, and you try to be respectful and allow people to get their shot, get their angle. That particular shot with a white background, I was really opposite. Nobody else was up there. Everybody was down more on the floor shooting, which is a classical way. And that's why I just figured I would try something else. But most of the time I am. We're shoulder to shoulder. You try to get somewhere early, which is not easy because if you're shooting 3 events a day, you're just trying to get to the next one before it starts, and you might not get the prime angle. People that can, sometimes they'll have a second camera and a remote that they'll set up. Um, but you do try to work together. There's very few issues between photographers. Um, I should knock on wood because we got Paris coming up, and you never know. But really, I think everybody knows we're there to do a job. We don't want to step in somebody's way, and so I've really seen people work together pretty well. I mean, there's limited spaces anyway. In other words, especially for high ticket places, like when Simone Biles goes, it's very limited. So not all of us that have press credentials can get in there. And we also have different color vests. Brown is for more general, but then blue is on the field. And so when you have a very specific need, you can go to the photo master and say, hey, the team I'm covering is in this particular event, so I really want to cover this event. And they try to work with you as well. And each sport, of course, has its own challenges. The winter ones, in particular, because of the extreme cold, and if you're outside shooting skiing or something, you have to hike up with crampons up the side of the run, in incredibly cold, rough conditions where the fingers are barely moving, no matter what you do. But here's another example where I purposely went for a higher angle. Most people are down low shooting as they're coming towards you. I thought this might be interesting to shoot something different. And this looks like the person on the track, working is very concerned about this person's health, and maybe she was, but in reality, she was trying to get her off the track for the next run. But she almost took sort of like a biblical pose on the ground. I mean, these people just give everything when they're running. I mean, if you think about, their whole life, their career in a sport, they are just everything. There's not an ounce left in them of energy, and they really collapse on the track. But it's this person's job to shuttle them off. Now, if somebody's injured, they have a crew immediately ready to go in and help, and they're great. I mean, I did see that a couple of times, and they're really on top of stuff. But I really tried to my coverage was really to try to show the overall idea of the games, and the different sports, and so I didn't focus on any particular sports. I tried to, the one consistency pretty much is fast. You shoot fast shutter speed. So typically I was around 2500th of a second. So one is you try to find an angle, just like this last one. I liked shooting higher, and so that then the judo people were isolated on the mat rather than having distracting things on the background. Same thing here. I liked the angle where the rings were behind her. Obviously, there's a camera position from behind. Nothing I can do about that. Now, this is interesting because this was at another arena where there's just absolutely nobody in the audience. And I'll show you a shot later that shows that. I probably should have put that right after that. This was a very rare shot. Because of COVID, we could not get close to the athletes. Now I'm wearing a mask. He was just taking a quick break from practice, a boxing practice round, and was very close to the net. So I just asked, he's from Cuba, if I could do a quick portrait. He said fine, and so I sort of went back to my 24 to 70 shallow depth of field shot. And then catching it in the ring. And so you do have to have, and I'm not even really necessarily a sports photographer per se, but I understand how things are done. And I do love sports, and so I understand, angles and key moments. And so, this is such a case, you don't want.
Yeah, this is beautiful. Each of their arms have sort of the same definition.
Yeah.
In the same place. So, Mark, how do you judge in retrospect? Like, so the events are over, right?
Yeah.
And you're coming home. I did a good job, or like, how do you evaluate yourself and the
Right.
body's work?
Right. Well, and this is that shot I probably should have moved up, where this is actually during a game. This is not before the game, after the game. This
Right.
is what the stands look like during a game. Okay, so in order to think, well, was I successful? Well, first of all, there's editors on the other side that will let you know if you're not successful.
Right. Okay.
As you know all too well, I'm sure you've told a few people, it's like, no, this isn't working. And so that fortunately I did not hear, but sometimes you'll get something like have more extensive coverage of this particular thing, something like that. But once I had hooked into a story and I decided this is what I really want you to, we really love the idea, because I was writing the story as well. They love the idea, and I'll show some images from that. You'll see why it worked, and a lot of stuff got out in different ways, different publications, and so this is the story where I knew it's like, well, I knew obviously the single images from the 10-meter platform were successful images. I liked, the design of the images freezing people in midair. I thought they were fascinating, so I thought that might also be interesting to other people. But the Team USA did a great thing before the start of the Paralympics, is they put out a note saying, does anybody want to come out to the military base where we're going to introduce some of the Paralympians? And amazingly, just a few people signed up for it. But I thought, well, this is great to hear about what, possible stories are out there. And when I did, I heard this person's story. This is her last name is Shepard, is Team USA, but she was born in Vietnam, and her parents were not married to each other. They were married to other people, and so her biological parents decided that the only way they could be together for eternity was to blow themselves up. And so they strapped bombs to themselves and held her, and they succeeded in killing themselves, but they blew her legs off. And so,
Oh my
uh,
God.
yeah, and so that was her story. Um, Haven Shepherd is her full name. And so then there was a writer, an equestrian, who had become a paraplegic, a Paralympian rather. Uh, she lost use of her legs because she was in line at the Brussels airport and they had the terrorist attack, and she was standing next to one of the bombers. And so that's another person that I heard about at this meeting when they were introducing everybody. All sorts of people, but I picked up on these three. The third person was a javelinist who was in McDonald's parking lot, and it was an altercation that had happened in a restaurant that ended up in a parking lot with a former soldier that had PTSD, and so this guy was shot by this guy, and ended up as a paraplegic. And so it dawned on me that, well, okay, we all know wounded warriors and all the amazing stuff they're doing, people that served in the military, but were crippled by something that happened overseas. And some of them, such great athletes, had become Paralympians. But here are three civilians that ended up eventually regaining their lives uh, through sports and a purpose. And so that's the story I hooked onto, and then pitched that for my biggest feature, which ended up as a 6 or 8 page feature in Newsweek in the 20th anniversary of 9/11. They ran it in that same issue. And so this is the double page spread that they opened with. And so this is Haven right here before she jumps in. And you can see that these are her, artificial limbs. I mean, she's got an amazing attitude. But she said, she was, and I interviewed them as well. And so it was fairly easy for her, she said, because in a sense, that's all she's ever known. Where the other people were adults when it happened. And so this is a gentleman, who does the who does the javelin, and I worked it out where I was able to do a portrait of him. This was so difficult to do. It's not obviously a difficult shot, but I brought a Stella light and illuminated him, and we met outside the stadium because we were not supposed to be close at all. So I set something up. His manager said, "Okay, we'll be at the stadium at this time. Let's just meet quickly. You can do it, and then we'll continue on." So that's sort of the way it worked. And here's the equestrian. And she went through the hardest time where she didn't want to live, super depressed, but it was really getting back on a horse, literally, that saved her life. And this is lit once again. You can see sort of like the highlight in the horse's eye. But I tried it when I light, and you can't use strobes or anything or artificial lights except for video people in the Olympics, except for something like this. Obviously, during the games, you can't use anything. But here's how they use the double page, opener. And I'm always fascinated to see how art directors, use things. And so the time, so the editor I was working with helped with the title and called it "From Out of Violence," and then the subheading is pretty straightforward about perseverance and triumph. And triumph doesn't mean winning the gold. It just being there is a triumph. But the reality, once again, is we were doing the Olympics and Paralympics during very strange times. And, the people in Japan are very good about following, rules about, okay, somebody says, keep your mask on, you keep your mask on. And masks in Japan, for those that have been there, are a norm anyway, out of courtesy. If you have a cold, you put a mask on out of respect for other people. I cannot say that the crowds, and crowds meaning the members of other teams that were in attendance went along with this, and so this was a pitched battle in order to keep people with their masks on, but they made the effort. Okay, and so some different sports coverage. These are Paralympians. I mean,
And
amazing.
Mark, question: were all the photographers being checked? You're taking COVID tests?
Yes, all the time. And I've got to say, I didn't realize how easy we had it in Japan until I went to Beijing. So, because Beijing was a whole other ball game. But here she's serving with one hand. This girl from Sri Lanka was playing with a hand grenade as a kid and blew her hands off, because they had with the Tamil Tigers. And I should point out that probably, most photographers go home. And it was actually David Burnett again. I said, you might get the most interesting and deepest stories because you're staying on. And my dad had a severe case of polio, but yet he never let that slow him down. And I am sure he had something to do with with my interest in this, and also how he was a great athlete in spite of just having use of one arm and a very curved spine. This is blind football, which is amazing. The soccer ball, as we call it, is super hard, and it has pieces of glass inside or something like that that bounce around so they can actually hear it. So the crowd is told, do not make noise because they have to hear the soccer ball so they can kick it. And this is a blind person doing the marathon. And of course, they have their guides with them. But can you imagine running on uneven terrain for 26.2 miles and you're blind? I mean, that's just incredible. So this is something I could do between the Olympics and Paralympics. This is somebody that was training a hopeful. And I used the Stella lights, which I know Robert, who we have here, is a big fan of these lights. But I'll show you how I shot it. And so this is in obviously slow motion. I didn't make him go this slow, but how I did the shot, locked down on a tripod and just shot as he was doing his routine. And all he had to do is I said, just stick the landing and we'll be fine. Of course, easier said than done. And he did nail it. And I did the same thing, right here. And you can see my, I got Japanese jeans on, by the way. For anybody who goes to Japan, try to buy jeans, best jeans in the world. Yeah, but this guy's good. Okay, I'm going to go a little quicker through Beijing, but Beijing was very, very different. As I said, Tokyo, we took the tests. We were able to, after 3 days, go out fairly easily. Within 14, I could go anywhere in Japan. But in Beijing for 45 days, I could not leave the compound. Or the bubble, as they called it. But this is the plane, and we're all sitting in the back, the people that were going in, and this is the plane to Beijing. Going to go quicker.
Wait, Mark.
Oh, sure. Yeah, go ahead.
Can you evaluate the experience from each of these different places? The sentiment behind like the events that you're covering and the people you're covering with and the COVID. I mean, how did that play into what you were doing daily? I mean, that sort of added stress.
It's tough, especially Beijing, because in Tokyo, I could get out between the Olympics and Paralympics and continue my hot spring story and meet up with friends. We had dinners. Of course, it was, restrictive. We were wearing masks and all that, but there was a sense of normalcy. With Beijing, we were in a bubble for the whole 45 days. And I understand why. I'm not saying, one's better than the other. One was definitely more relaxing than the other. But it's an incredibly difficult thing to bring the world together. And there were people that came in that tested positive and they had to be isolated and then checked day after day. And so they had special rooms for them. But they pulled it off and everybody cooperated. It was frustrating, but we were all in the same boat. We were all dealing with the same thing, and the goal was the same, to pull off the Olympics. And there were so many interesting stories in between. So of course, once the games are going on, we still could have dinners in the restaurants at our hotel and interact with the other people that were staying at the hotel. There was one bar, and we could go to other hotels within our bubble. And like there was a great bar at one place, and so we could hang out and talk. And so there was that sense of normalcy there. But like some friends came to visit me on the other side of the fence that separated us, the media center, because we had a big media center we would go to. And so at the main media center, we could go out for a walk. And so that was nicknamed the yard, kind of like, in a prison. And so we would do the walk. But a friend of mine who lives in Beijing came, and we could talk with a fence and then about 6 feet on either side separating us. And he and his girlfriend said they would bring peanuts back next time to toss them over to us.
Good. So Mark, I mean, as you're living in this situation, you're realizing that people are dying all over the world.
Oh, yeah.
from this, how does that play into the security and the distancing? Because at that point, no one knew what the right thing to do was, to 6 feet away, whatever the mask and all the rest. How did that play into the mentality of covering this event?
Well, in one sense, we were sort of in the safest places in the world. There's medical staff everywhere. We're being tested every day. And so I don't think we had more concern than most people. We might have actually had even less than a lot of people. Now, in terms of being aware of the outside world, of course, sympathy and concern for people like that. I mean, I've also been in war zones and things like that. And so I'm no stranger to pretty intense situations. There was none of that sort of really horrific stuff going on. It was just really being monitored. And so, from an inside thing, it was not tough. But there were all these inside stories like this is that, remember that young Russian skater that was being accused of doping, and she said, oh,
Yeah.
she was taking her the heart medicine of her grandfather. Well, this was heartbreaking to watch her because she fell. She really had the eyes of the world looking at her, as all these athletes do. But really, she really had just too much on her. And the first time she fell, you could almost feel like, wow, it's really all over for her. And then she fell again. And it was just so painful to watch her do this. But I also, once again, expanded out to see the different types of uh, sports, but also this sort of reminded me of this sport. The women cleaning the place, but you can see these are the face masks they had on, to try to keep things clean and COVID free. And then at the venues, there's nobody in the stands, but this is the support medical staff there. They'll stand by. So I did try to turn the camera the other direction and get a sense of what it was like to be there, which is exactly, what you're saying. It's like, what was it like to be there in this COVID time? And I definitely wanted to document that. And so this is a fellow photographer here just to show you under really rough uh, conditions. It was incredibly cold there. It was so cold and windy. One day we had to stay out an extra hour before the start. But this is the same sort of weather that, during the Korean War, at the breakout at the dam there, between 1950 and 53, I guess it was 1952 or 53, when very famous battle, the Chosin Reservoir. I mean, there were soldiers out there for days. And so I always keep that in mind. It's so
Yeah,
relative.
Mark, when did that thought come to your mind? That's a really interesting thought that there you are covering the Olympics and thinking about the Korean War.
I
Like
think about that all the time. And
that
that even might
context
go,
is interesting.
right. No, that even goes back to like the Merv Griffin days, which is where I started my career, where Merv said to the writers, he goes, look, do not ask a question that allows these celebrities to whine how difficult it is that they have to sit in a makeup chair for 2.5 hours before they go out. He said, think about a coal miner just coming out of the ground after 12 hours sitting, with dirt under their nails and watching us. And do they really want to hear that? And inevitably, some celebrities would find a way to manage to say that. And of course, for them, yeah, it's not easy sitting in a makeup chair for 2 hours and drinking a cappuccino. For real. I mean, that's, maybe not the most fun in the world, but it's all relative. And so I have always kept in mind, uh, it's just part of my nature. I just think in those terms. And so there's very few things that could rile me up. If somebody messes with my dog, my wife, or my mom, that's a different story. But pretty
In
much,
that order?
it depends who I'm sitting with. I'll change that depending on that. But I mean, just like, I was with my friend Nick Ud in Washington, D.C., and somebody jumped us, and I dispatched the guy because so I should say four. Nobody messes with Nick Ud either. There you go. See, that's there's four people. But I'm a really nice guy. But but this is what happens. I was out there and I don't have great circulation to my outer extremities. And this is a little souvenir I got, which is frostbite from being out there. And the guy at NPS, a really great guy, actually said to me, he says, "Wow, you should do some sort of crime because you don't have any fingerprints." And I
Ah,
said, "Well, that's a great idea, and China's a great place to do it. They don't have that $950 misdemeanor thing here. So like that we do in California. So anyway, so yeah, Beijing, I did turn toward the crowds, and shoot the other direction. Um, but here's, I want to just go back to this one quickly. But this is what we did every morning. This is what we were greeted by. This is where we would sit down and they would stick Q-tips up our nose so far. She was cleaning the backside of my brain. It was because at that time, especially, I think they said you have to tear in order for them to know that they've gone far enough, and it really was tough. But she was happy to participate because she contributes, so that's why she's happy according to the sign. But they were doing a very useful thing, and this is the Paralympics again. I mean, just amazing athletes, and the war with Ukraine, between Russia and Ukraine, broke out just before the Paralympics, and so I started to refocus on the Ukrainians. And so that was actually talking with Zuma Press, said, hey, make sure you get lots of Ukrainian coverage. And so that's where I did get something from the head office saying, make sure to focus and get that. This is very unusual for me to use this wide an angle, but I borrowed it from NPS, Nikon Professional Services, because I did want to show what it looked like from the back and get this. So this is and I tend to go by what Cartier-Bresson told me, which is big name dropping. He once said a wide angle is like garlic. A little bit of it makes the food taste great. A lot of it stinks. But I do think in this context it works. And so this is what it looks like. But you see how everybody's got their position? Frank is saying, how do we work together?
Yeah.
And we actually will look back and say, hey, am I clear? Or do you mind if I take a knee right here? That's how you have to do it.
So Mark, you mentioned the wide angle lens,
Yeah.
right? You're using that. I mean, is that sort of like, the kid who found, the cookie jar, like, wow, this is fun. This is so different from what I use. I mean, like from a creative experience, just, taking out the wide angle lens. Like, what does that make you feel like?
Um, I actually asked if I could borrow it after shooting another hockey game and feeling that I wasn't wide enough, and I really wanted to try to get what was going on behind the net. And so it was really more a tool to serve a purpose. But I do find that sometimes an extreme, a fisheye just screams fisheye. But in the right context, it's a very useful tool. So I'm really more about what does it take to get the vision I'm looking for, and so that was what I was looking for. So I guess I should hand it back to you, right? Or you could just take
Yeah,
it.
no, yeah, no, yeah, you could stop sharing and
Okay.
anybody have any questions, you could either, shout it out or put it into the chat room, but you'll see a lot of nice reaction. So when do you head off to Paris, Mark?
I'm leaving on the 22nd. I'm just flying through Amsterdam for a day. I have a meeting there. Then I'll continue down. So just getting there on the 24th. So just 2 days in advance. And so hopefully what I'll do is I'll visit the offices at the main. First of all, I'll immediately get to the main media center, and I'll go around to some of the offices and pick up material, because they'll have some printouts about their athletes, who's doing what, and try to do some homework. I do have some threads that I want to follow going in, but often, you go in with one idea, as in any genre or anything, you might go in with an idea and then it changes and then you go a different direction. I mean, when I've been in Ukraine twice during the war, and I ended up completely changing the idea I had and following the people that were rescuing animals from war zones, and or war zones. So, and so sometimes things don't pan out, so you have to go a different way. But just like with Tokyo and finding out about the Paralympians, and then running with that story, which was really, to me, a perfect fit. And there'll undoubtedly be situations like that. So you really have to sort of be open to things, and the media center, and of course, remember all the PR people for all the teams there want you to do these stories, and so they want to get those stories out to you too. And so you just have to see what a good fit is. And really some of the best stories are really sort of like the asides of things. I mean, just like with history, my master's is in history, and so was Switzerland doing during World War II? That's an interesting story, or about a Japanese soldier that stayed in the Philippines until 1974 fighting the
Right.
war. I mean,
That's what I was told.
right,
Yeah.
right. And so these asides to me are far more interesting, and can tell the bigger story. And so I will be looking, for those. You also at the same time have to be aware that the Paris Olympics, they are the first post-pandemic Olympics, but there's a lot of upheaval going on in the world now. And we have to be very aware of the possibility of things happening there, beyond the games. And so, how are you going to react to that? Um, and to be aware of that. And so, if I'm just covering sports, maybe I won't have a super wide angle. But if I want to be ready in case something else happens, then maybe I might have a different piece of equipment
And,
with.
and yeah. And what number Olympics is this for you?
This is only my so I've done two Olympics and two Paralympics, and then many, many years ago I was in Japan covering the Special Olympics.
Mm.
And so really I haven't covered a lot of games. The sports I typically cover, because my work. I mean, my work is more in North Korea or Iran, or more
Right.
documentary, or sometimes more travel. Um, so I haven't done a lot, and so the Olympics really came to me more because of them taking place in Tokyo. But since I love sports, and things worked
Yeah.
out well, with the coverage and the amount of placements, I'm fortunate enough to be doing it again. Um, and I mean, it's just amazing to see these athletes in action. They are the most amazing people. I mean, actually, I just saw Anna Karenina by the Joffrey Ballet 2 days ago, and they really should make um, ballet an Olympic sport, because I don't know if there's better. Now, strangely enough, and I don't know if this is true, so this is something as an historian I shouldn't be doing. So
I will put a disclaimer
somebody,
on this.
please do, please do. Somebody told me, and this could be looked up easily enough, but that uh, you know, each Olympics you get to choose a sport, right? That's how baseball came in when the US had it. But now 2028 is going to be in LA. Supposedly they picked cricket. Uh, Now that to me makes no sense at all. I think cricket's a great sport. I just don't see the US, why would we decide to sponsor or put forward that? I could think of a lot of other sports that and yeah, including ballet, uh, or other things that could be sports, I should say. I don't quite get that, but
Yeah,
uh,
that's an interesting one, but I'm sure I mean, cricket is uh, outside of the United States
yeah.
an incredibly popular sport. I mean, I don't know the numbers, but I can see that. But why are we doing it is
No,
sort of a
that's the point.
question.
That's the point. That's the point. No, no, of course, no. Cricket 100% uh, uh, should be an Olympic sport. But why is the U.S. using their card to
Yeah,
to to do that? Because who knows, the next time we'll have a chance to do it
yeah.
again.
And so, Mark, as you get on the plane to go right to
Yeah.
this event, do you feel the same youthful energy that you did, 20, 30 years, going to do this or going to shoot that? How do you get yourself to that same level of enthusiasm to go and shoot?
That's a great question. Well, first of all, it's always exciting, and the toughest part is really sort of getting there and getting situated. Once you're at your hotel and your stuff is there, and you get to the media center and you start to get stuff, you know the venues, and you sign in for which ones you're going to do. there's a nice rhythm to it. You really don't sleep, as Burnett said, until September, especially because I'm going straight through and then doing the Paralympics. But no, I feel just as excited and amazed. My back doesn't feel as excited and amazed as it did 30 years ago.
I'm
But
sure.
fortunately, and 30 years ago, which of course, wasn't doing the Olympics back then, but we really didn't have these roller bags and backpacks and things. We are so fortunate now, and so I am on a think tank pro team, and uh, they make such incredible bags. What we do, and 90%, I don't know the exact number, almost everybody has a think tank roller bag, and we take it to the venue, and then at the venue there's lockers. And so then we're able to lock our equipment away. And then we have our vests, we have photo vests. And so pretty much you're just going out with two, uh, some people go with three bodies, different length lenses. You've got your pockets, um, and a monopod, and you're pretty much just out there. And so there is the really almost the toughest part is then going back and wading through the incredible amount of images you're shooting. And so now with the Z9 and the Z8, because I just shoot RAW, 20 frames per second. And for those shooting JPEGs and shooting 120, I just, or whatever, that's just nuts. I'm happy enough. If I can't get it within 20 frames per second, I'm doing something wrong. Oh, I do want to say real quickly, I do shoot. The Olympics are not the only sport. I love golf, and so I cover the Masters last year in LA. I cover the Dodgers all the time. And of course now there's the tie-in with the Japan thing because of Otani and Yamamoto, and I shoot that all the time, and so I do cover a decent amount of sports, but it tends to be very focused.
So do you ever think, I mean, the way you described getting to the hotel, getting settled, do you keep any kind of diary?
When I was younger and backpacking around, Europe and Asia, I would keep a diary. I don't anymore. It probably would be a very, very good
It would
thing.
be great to even do like a live podcast, just 20 seconds every so often. We're here, we're there, just sort of behind the
Oh,
scene
that's interesting.
of what's going on. That could be a lot of fun.
That's a great idea. I actually should do that. I'll record a little bit and
And then
put it
just
up
post
there.
it, right? I mean, you just
Right.
post it once
I will do that. Give me,
with all your free time,
yeah,
you could be doing it all day, right?
that's true.
And then the camaraderie of you and your fellow photographers and the meals and the frustrations and all of that could really be sort of intriguing for all of us.
That's true. Funny enough, he's talking about the frustrations. Probably one of the biggest frustrations and the complaints, funny enough, was because we're so limited in Tokyo, that pretty much for most of the photographers, because they would get there, and they didn't have that much time there, and so they were pretty much quarantined to being right at the place and with language things and taking the bus, this and that. I knew how to get around because I can speak Japanese and I've been there a million times, and I had a pass, and I got in there a little bit early. So anyway, I would stop at the conveni at a 7-Eleven or Lawson or whatever and pick up food because the food at the venues, there were no open food places. So they would just have stuff for the athletes in the, I'm not the athletes, I'm sorry, for the media in the media room. And so they thought, okay, they're foreigners, so they're going to like peanut butter and jelly sandwiches and things. But
Right.
then you would see the people working there as we would walk by, and they would have these great old bento boxes and stuff, and it's
There
like,
you
oh
go.
my God. And so I would just say to people, hey, just stop on the way at 7-Eleven and pick something up because they make great food. And
Yeah.
so
Stuff like that. I mean, I can see that as almost as a comedy routine. They leave us with
could
fucking
be.
peanut butter. What do we,
Exactly.
right? I
Exactly.
mean,
Yeah.
there's a whole thing there for you, Mark. You need to bring along an intern just to be shooting your commentary.
That's I wish there was the budget for that.
Ah, there's a budget for anything.
There you go. That's right. I don't have a budget for myself. I know Robert Levy is now volunteering.
All right, there you go.
Yeah, Robert, be careful for what you wish for.
Let's start it in the chat room, Robert. What's the first offer?
I'm in.
Here we go.
No, but that really could be a lot of fun.
A great idea. Well, the problem with Robert is he'll end up shooting a better shot than me.
Yeah, there you go.
Sure.
And that's not appreciated. So
Yeah, no, that we don't want. That we wouldn't want. Well,
No.
and so I don't know if Kyle is still there. So Mark,
I'm still here.
before you're going to the Olympics, anything else in between? I mean, what else do you do to prep?
Well, I mean, very quickly, I'm just going to, I just came off 5 weeks of 5 trips, but I purposely am stopping now to refocus, sort of play catch up here. That said, I am going to Arches National Park this weekend, just to do that. And then officially from July 1st until I leave, unless there's a spot news thing or something that I have to do, I'm going to try to stay around here. But the first time I went, and I have to thank Nick Ud again, because I had just gotten the Z9 just like a week before I was getting on a plane to Moscow. And I said, I got to shoot something around here to practice, to get used to it. I had never done 3D tracking or any of this stuff. And he said, go shoot hummingbirds. Which I did, because there's a place in LA, they have hummingbirds, and I practiced with the 3D tracking, and it was amazing. And he was right. And so
Just clear out your head. It's great,
yeah,
right? You need to do that.
need to do that. Yeah, for sure.
And Kyle, what's up next for you?
Um, I have a show at the Colorado Photographic Arts Center this Saturday, actually, if anybody of you are in
Wow, that's great.
Denver.
Good for you.
But just working on some new projects. I think a lot of the work that I want to focus on is around like intimacy and relationships. So there's this new project that I've been working on related to like male friendship. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
You see,
getting
it's interesting listening to you, listening to Mark. There's a bunch of years in between, but like if I just closed my eyes and I wasn't looking and hearing the voice differences, the same youthful enthusiasm is the thread. Right. And that's really the lesson of the evening, right? That enthusiasm to go and shoot and be ready and go to the 7-Elevens and lenses and all of that, like that's really like those are the golden nuggets of a career.
Well, and you've got that too, Frank. Your voice is just the same as
I
what
agree.
you
I
made
agree.
a zillion years ago. And part of it is, I mean, my dad made it to 93, and he was joking up until the last couple of days. I did once say to Mika, when she was saying, "When are you going to grow up?" And I said, "What happens if you take the boy out of the man?" She goes, "You have a man." I said, "Damn, even with English as her second language, she can still outthink me."
Yeah, that's beautiful.
Isn't it? Nailed me right there in a second.
Had a man, that's great.
Yeah.
Well,
So congratulations, Kyle. Good luck in Denver. That's going to be great.
Thank you. Thank you.
yeah, that's beautiful, really beautiful. I thank Ted and Noon for introducing us. That was really fortuitous for all of us. So I want to thank everyone for coming in. If there's any other questions, now would be the time to, for either one of our presenters. Like I said, July 9th, we're going to be live in New York City with Glenn Backen and Deb Fong presenting. Mark, I don't know if you know, but we've been doing these series where I do a week-long presentation of photographers who are documenting what's going on in Ukraine.
Oh, I've watched a lot of those.
Oh, you have? Okay.
Oh, yeah. Oh,
I'd
no,
love
no.
to see your work. I'd love to see, you could do one of those. We're doing again in September.
Oh,
So,
I would love to do that. No, I watched
Right.
them later. No, what you're
Right.
doing is fantastic.
Right,
And
good.
you've continued on while a lot of the world has forgotten about what's going on. And it's, my friends, I was in a place called Vovchansk. Uh, I'll say this real quickly, hopefully, but that's now been, I think, overrun again as the Russians have made their move back toward Kharkiv. But yeah, let's talk about that. I would
Right.
love to do that.
Yeah, I'll send you some dates. So
Yep.
everybody, thank you so very much for coming. Enjoy the rest of your summer. Be safe, have fun, and we'll see you in a few weeks.